7 months pregnant and living on the streets, she was struck by a speeding car, only to be rescued by the wealthy driver who, unknowingly, would change her life forever. Would his act of responsibility turn into something more? Watch to the end and tell us. How far would you go for a stranger in need? The Unlikely Refuge. A love beyond expectation. Sophia Clark walked with difficulty down the crowded avenue, each step a challenge. Her 7-month swollen belly weighed more than ever, and the pang of hunger that had accompanied her since morning made everything seem harder. She had left her makeshift shelter early, hoping to find some food, or perhaps a place to rest for a few minutes. However, the city offered no solace to the most vulnerable. Her thoughts were elsewhere, worrying about the small being growing inside her. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. She had cried too much already, and now she had to be strong. For him. In the midst of her distraction, a horn blared, startling her. She looked up just as a black car sped towards her. Her body, too tired to react in time, remained motionless. The impact was inevitable. The sound of the collision echoed down the avenue, drawing the attention of nearby onlookers. The car screeched to a halt, skidding a few meters before coming to a complete stop. Victor Hayes, sitting behind the wheel, felt the air escape his lungs. His mind, so busy with figures and contracts, went blank. He had hit someone. He quickly got out of the vehicle, his heart pounding, and saw a young woman lying on the ground, clutching her belly with both hands. "My God," he murmured, kneeling beside her. His elegant gray suit stained with the dampness of the pavement, but he didn't care. His gaze fixed on Sophia's pale face, and then on her belly. "Are you hurt? Can you hear me?" Sophia tried to open her eyes. Her eyelids felt like lead. A sharp pain spread through her abdomen, but her priority wasn't herself. She raised a trembling hand towards him, whispering with a faint voice, "My baby, is he okay?" Victor felt a lump in his throat. He had never been an emotional man, but something about this woman, in her fragility, made him tremble. He fumbled for his phone and dialed quickly. "I need an ambulance now," he ordered the operator with an urgency that surprised even himself. He gave the exact address and refocused on Sophia. "Help is coming. Don't move. Everything's going to be okay." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know if it was pain or fear, but she felt more alone than ever. "I have no one," she whispered, her voice broken, barely audible. Victor frowned. Her words impacted him in a way he couldn't explain. How was it possible for someone to be so helpless in the world? The idea deeply disturbed him. "Don't worry, you're not alone now," he said, though he wasn't sure why he was doing it. He just knew he couldn't leave her there. The ambulance arrived in a matter of minutes. Paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing Sophia while Victor stayed close, ignoring the curious glances of pedestrians. When they tried to move him aside to take her to the hospital, he refused outright. "I'm going with her," he declared, his authoritative tone making it clear he wouldn't accept no for an answer. As they traveled to the hospital, Victor couldn't take his eyes off Sophia. Something about her unsettled him and drew him in at the same time. Her fragility, her determination to protect her baby despite her precarious situation, baffled him. He had known many people in his life, but no one like her. Sophia, for her part, could barely stay conscious. Victor's deep voice was the only thing that kept her awake. Despite everything, she couldn't stop thinking about her baby. No matter what happened to her, she just wanted him to be safe. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctors took over. Victor waited in the emergency room, unable to concentrate on anything but this woman and her unborn child. His assistants called him, reminding him of important meetings, but he ignored them. For the first time in years, work wasn't his priority. After what seemed like an eternity, a doctor came out to inform him. Mother and baby are stable, but she is malnourished and dehydrated. She'll need time to recover. Victor felt a wave of relief, but also guilt. If he hadn't been so distracted, none of this would have happened. He approached the room where Sophia was, determined to see her again. When he entered, she slowly opened her eyes and looked at him, with a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. "Thank you," she murmured. Victor looked at her intently, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something inside him change. He didn't know what it was, but he was sure his life would never be the same. A powerful encounter that sets the stage for destiny. What kind of future do you predict for Sophia and Victor? What lengths would you go to right a wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next chapter of this incredible journey. Sophia remained in the hospital bed, her pale face reflecting the weight of the doctor's words. A fractured leg and advanced pregnancy weren't an easy combination. As silence filled the room, her mind spun in circles, searching for an impossible solution. Tears threatened to fall, but she didn't want to show weakness in front of Victor, who watched her from the other end of the room with an unreadable expression. "Where do you plan to stay?" Victor asked, breaking the silence with his firm voice. Sophia looked away, uncomfortable. She didn't want to admit her reality in front of such an elegant and self-assured man. She instinctively caressed her belly, seeking comfort. "I don't have anywhere," she murmured, the words barely audible. "I have nowhere to go." Victor clenched his jaw. Something in that confession, in the vulnerability of that woman, moved him in a way he couldn't explain. He had always been a practical man, guided by logic, but at that moment an irrational decision took shape in his mind. "Then you're coming with me," he declared, his tone so firm it left no room for discussion. Sophia quickly looked up, her eyes filled with surprise and confusion. "What? No, I can't do that. You've already done enough by bringing me here. I don't need anything else." Victor sighed, crossing his arms as he looked at her with a mixture of exasperation and determination. "Sophia, I'm not asking your permission. It's the logical thing to do. You can't stay alone in this condition, much less on the street." "I don't want to be a burden to anyone," she retorted, a thread of pride in her voice. "This isn't about charity," Victor insisted, leaning slightly towards her. "This is about responsibility. If I hadn't been distracted, none of this would have happened. So stop arguing and accept." Sophia opened her mouth to object, but the words wouldn't come out. There was something in his tone, in the intensity of his gaze, that made it impossible to contradict him. Finally, she nodded slowly, feeling her pride shatter a little more. "All right, but only until I can stand on my own 2 feet." Victor nodded, satisfied. Though he didn't show it, he felt a strange relief knowing that Sophia would be under his care. There was something about her that awakened in him a need to protect her, to ensure she was safe. The process of transferring her to his house was carefully organized by Victor. A nurse helped Sophia prepare, while he gave precise instructions to his mansion staff to prepare a room on the ground floor, close to everything she might need. He was efficient and meticulous as always, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing it for something more than simple duty. When they arrived at Victor's imposing residence, Sophia couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The mansion was enormous, with perfectly manicured gardens and a facade that looked like something out of an architectural magazine. As the car drove up the driveway, Sophia bit her lip, feeling completely out of place. "This is too much," she murmured, looking out the window. "It's just a house," Victor replied indifferently, as if the place meant nothing to him. But for Sophia, it meant a lot. It was a reminder of how far she was from her own life, how fragile her situation was. When the car stopped in front of the main entrance, Victor got out first, walking confidently towards the door as he gave instructions to the staff. Sophia, on the other hand, remained in the car, feeling paralyzed. An employee appeared to help her, smiling kindly as she offered support to get out. "Welcome, miss. We've prepared everything for you. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Sophia thanked her with a weak nod as she moved with difficulty. Victor turned to her, watching her carefully. "Your room is at the end of the hallway," he said, nodding towards it. "It has a private bathroom and everything you might need. If anything's missing, let me know." Sophia nodded, her words caught in her throat. The room was much more than she could ever have imagined, with elegant furniture and a bed so large it seemed an unnecessary luxury. She carefully sat on the edge, looking around with a mixture of awe and confusion. Victor remained at the door, arms crossed as he observed her. Finally, he spoke, his tone softer than usual. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Sophia. You're here because it's the right thing to do. Just rest and take care of that baby." Sophia looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. For a moment, she felt she could trust him, though she still didn't understand why a man like Victor would do something like this for someone like her. But deep down, she appreciated his presence, even if she never admitted it to him. Victor left the room, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts. As he walked through the hallways of his mansion, his mind was restless. He didn't understand why he had decided to get involved, but one thing was certain. This woman and her child wouldn't just be a passing responsibility. Something inside him told him his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. An unlikely sanctuary. But how long can this arrangement last? What unspoken tensions do you think will arise between Victor and Sophia? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the unfolding drama. The atmosphere in Victor's mansion remained tense, almost as if an invisible barrier stood between him and Sophia. Although she was settled in a spacious, bright room, she couldn't help but feel out of place. Victor's emotional distance was palpable, and their interactions, though cordial, were cold, almost mechanical. It seemed more like a tacit contract than a shared life. Sophia, proud as ever, didn't want to appear weak in front of him. Every word they exchanged was charged with an underlying tension, as if both were walking on a tightrope, trying not to cross boundaries neither had defined. However, that night, after a silent dinner, Sophia broke the ice, albeit with a challenging tone. "I don't need your pity, Mr. Hayes," she said suddenly, placing her teacup on the wooden table with more force than necessary. Her eyes looked directly at him, challenging his composure. Victor, who was reviewing some documents, slowly looked up. His gaze, cold and calculating, fixed on her like a scalpel seeking a weakness. "I'm not offering pity, Sophia. I'm just doing what's right. Don't misunderstand," he replied, his tone controlled, but tinged with slight disdain. Sophia pressed her lips together, feeling wounded pride burn in her chest. But she said nothing more. She carefully got up, leaning on the crutches the doctor had given her, and left the dining room with firm but slow steps. Victor watched her leave, his dark eyes reflecting something even he couldn't decipher. In the following days, Sophia sought to keep herself busy. She couldn't stand the thought of being cooped up doing nothing. She began to help Mrs. Davies, the cook, who at first was reluctant, but quickly grew fond of the young woman. Mrs. Davies, a robust and maternal woman, saw in Sophia someone in need of support, even if she didn't ask for it directly. "You don't have to do this, child. You're here to recover, not to work," she said one morning, while Sophia tried to knead dough with her bandaged leg, propped on a stool. "I can't just sit around, it's not fair. You already do too much," Sophia replied, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. Victor, who was passing near the kitchen threshold, stopped when he heard their voices. He had no intention of interrupting, but something compelled him to stay there, out of sight, listening. "And your family? Don't you have anyone to help you?" Mrs. Davies asked curiously. Sophia stopped kneading for a moment. Her eyes clouded, and her voice dropped slightly. "My family isn't like yours, Mrs. Davies. My mother died when I was a child, and my father, well, he was never really present. Then I married young, to Edward, thinking I'd have a better life. But when he found out I was pregnant, he disappeared." Mrs. Davies shook her head, indignant. "Bad man! How despicable to leave you in such a situation!" Sophia offered a bitter smile, as if trying to downplay it. "I've survived until now, haven't I? I suppose that counts for something." Victor, listening from the shadows, felt a knot form in his chest. He had never sought to know more about Sophia. For him, she was just a young woman who had had the misfortune of crossing his path that rainy night. But now, hearing her story, something stirred within him. A part of himself recognized the pain of betrayal, the emptiness of having trusted someone who had simply left. Although he wouldn't admit it, his own experience with Eleanor, his ex-wife, still left a scar he tried to ignore. However, Victor was not a man to show his emotions easily. When he entered the kitchen, his face was as serious as ever. Mrs. Davies and Sophia turned to him, surprised by his sudden presence. "Am I interrupting something?" he asked, though he didn't seem to be. Sophia straightened her back, quickly regaining her defensive posture. "No, not at all. Just helping Mrs. Davies a little." Victor nodded, his gaze fixed on her for a second longer than necessary. Then he turned to the cook. "Could you prepare a coffee for me in the study? I need to work." Mrs. Davies nodded quickly, while Victor left without another word. But that night, as he reviewed his documents, his mind couldn't concentrate. Sophia's words kept echoing in his head, mixing with images of his own past. For the first time in years, Victor wondered if the distance he had always kept from others was protecting him, or simply isolating him. Sophia's painful past has been revealed, and it's impacting Victor more than he lets on. What do you think this shared vulnerability means for their unusual relationship? Share your insights in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next emotional turning point. The unexpected arrival of Edward filled the air with tension in the mansion. Sophia stood in the reception hall, her face pale but firm. Although her heart pounded, she refused to let fear dominate her. Edward, dressed in a cheap suit that tried to convey decency, maintained a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sophia, darling, I've been thinking about everything that happened," he began, his tone saccharine but laden with falsehood. He took a step towards her, trying to appear convincing. "I made a mistake, I admit it, but I'm here to fix it. You and our child deserve better. You deserve for me to be by your side." Sophia felt disgust and rage swell in her chest. She took a step back, instinctively shielding her belly. Her eyes filled with determination. "You have no right to call us your family," she retorted, her voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from contained fury. "You abandoned me when I needed you most, Edward. Now you come here feigning repentance. Why, what is it you really want? Edward tried to maintain his composure, but the harshness of Sophia's words unsettled him for an instant. His gaze, which had tried to appear warm, hardened. "I just want what's mine, Sophia, and you and that child belong to me." Before he could say anything more, a deep, authoritative voice interrupted the conversation. "Who are you to speak like that?" Victor asked, entering the reception hall with firm steps. His dark eyes drilled into Edward like daggers. Although his expression remained controlled, the threat in his tone was unmistakable. Edward turned his head to him, surprised by his sudden presence. He quickly assessed Victor, noting the impeccable suit, the imposing posture, and the confidence he radiated. In a desperate attempt to maintain his facade, he extended his hand. "I'm Edward, Sophia's husband," he said, feigning confidence. But Victor didn't accept the gesture. Instead, he crossed his arms, standing still in front of him. "Husband?" Victor repeated, with a slight arch of an eyebrow. "From what I know, husbands don't abandon their wives in the worst possible situation. What are you really doing here?" Edward pressed his lips together, clearly uncomfortable with the turn the conversation was taking. But before he could invent an excuse, Sophia interrupted him. "Don't lie to him, Edward," she said in a clear voice, stepping forward, leaning on her crutches. "You have no reason to be here. You left and never looked back. If you think you can manipulate me again, you're wrong." The confidence in her words surprised Victor, who glanced at her, admiring her bravery. But Edward was not willing to retreat so easily. His forced smile vanished, and his true nature came to light. "Be careful what you say, Sophia," he growled, his voice now lower and more threatening. "Don't forget I'm that child's father. I have rights." Victor stepped forward, placing himself between Edward and Sophia. His height and presence dwarfed the man trying to intimidate. "And I wouldn't forget that you're in my house, Edward. Here you have no rights, much less authority to intimidate anyone. I suggest you leave right now before I call security." Edward looked at Victor with rage, but he knew he had no way to win in that situation. However, before leaving, he cast a final glance at the window where he knew Sophia would be. "This isn't over, Sophia," he growled, before disappearing into the night. Victor closed the door with a deep sigh. Turning, he found Sophia watching him from the staircase, Gabrielle in her arms. She had heard everything, and although her face showed concern, there was also gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for everything," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Victor guided her back to the sofa, making sure she was comfortable before speaking again. "What is it he really wants?" he asked, his tone softer now. Sophia sighed, bringing a hand to her belly as if to shield her child from the words she was about to say. "Money. It's always been the only thing that mattered to him. He's in debt, and he probably thinks he can take advantage of my situation." Victor nodded slowly, his calculating eyes looking into the distance. He was already thinking about how to handle the situation, how to protect Sophia from someone so despicable. But he said nothing more. Instead, he remained by her side, a silent support that spoke more than any words. Both knew that Edward wouldn't give up easily, but they also knew that, together, they could face him. A dangerous confrontation averted, but the threat of Edward still looms. What do you think this shared battle means for Victor and Sophia's growing bond? Share your hopes for their future in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next tender developments. The days in the mansion unfolded with a calm that little by little transformed into a peculiar routine between Sophia and Victor. Although both maintained a certain distance, it was impossible not to notice how their interactions began to acquire a new depth. Victor, who previously only observed from afar, started finding small excuses to cross paths with Sophia, while she, though cautious, allowed herself moments of trust in his presence. One night, while the rest of the house was silent, Sophia got out of bed and decided to make some tea in the kitchen. The weight of the past few days, especially the encounter with Edward, still lingered in her mind. Moving carefully so as not to wake anyone, she turned on the dim light and began to heat water. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice Victor's presence in the doorway. "You shouldn't be walking so much on that leg," he said, with a tone of concern mixed with his usual seriousness. Sophia gave a small start and turned to him, clutching a hand to her chest. "You startled me," she exclaimed, letting out a soft laugh that contrasted with the nocturnal atmosphere. Victor took another step into the kitchen, his tall, elegant figure casting a shadow on the wall. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her curiously. "It wasn't my intention, but you have to admit you shouldn't be up at this hour." "I couldn't sleep," she replied honestly, as she poured the hot water into a cup. Then, without looking directly at him, she added, "Sometimes my mind won't let me rest." Victor nodded, understanding the feeling more than he cared to admit. He approached slowly and took a seat at the table, his gaze fixed on Sophia. For a moment, the only sound in the kitchen was the faint hiss of the kettle cooling down. "I've been watching you," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but laden with meaning. "And I can't help but admire how strong you are. Despite everything you've been through, you're still standing." Sophia looked up, surprised by his words. She would never have expected something like that from Victor, whose behavior had always been so reserved. A small smile formed on her lips. "Perhaps because I have no other choice," she replied with a light tone, though her words carried a painful truth. Victor looked at her for a few seconds, as if searching for something in her eyes. Then he shook his head softly and added, "Sometimes, having no options is what makes us strongest. But not everyone knows how to make the most of it, like you do." Sophia lowered her gaze to her cup, feeling a slight blush warm her cheeks. There was something in the way Victor spoke, in the sincerity of his tone, that made his words sink deep. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply sat across from him, letting the silence speak for them. Victor, for his part, couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something about Sophia that intrigued him, something that challenged him to rethink many things. His world, once so structured and predictable, seemed to have changed since her arrival. And although he wouldn't admit it aloud, that change wasn't as unpleasant as he had imagined. "Sophia," he said after a moment, his voice softer now, "I want you to know that you're not alone. As long as you're here, I'll do everything I can to protect you and your son." She looked at him, surprised by the implicit promise in his words. His eyes, which had always been a haven of contained emotions, now seemed to show something more, a warmth she had never seen in him. "Thank you, Victor," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. The exchange of glances between them was brief, but loaded with meaning. Both knew that something was changing, though neither of them was ready to put it into words. Finally, Sophia broke the moment, carefully getting up to wash her cup. "Well, I think I can go back to bed now," she said, trying to lighten the mood. Victor nodded, standing up as well. But before she left the kitchen, he added in a low tone, "Rest, Sophia. The future may be complicated, but I'm sure you'll find a way to face it." She looked at him one last time before disappearing down the hallway. That night, as both tried to sleep, their minds remained restless. Something between them had changed, and although neither knew it for sure, the bond that was beginning to form promised to alter their lives forever. A quiet moment of connection, a promise unspoken. What do you think this growing bond will mean when Sophia's baby arrives? Share your heartfelt thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the miracle to unfold. The day began with a deceptive calm. Sophia was in her room, enjoying a rare moment of tranquility as she read a book Mrs. Davies had left for her. The baby, increasingly restless inside her womb, seemed to anticipate his arrival. It was then that a sharp pain pierced her, stealing her breath. Her breathing became heavy, and the first contractions made her understand that the moment had arrived. She called Victor urgently, her voice breaking as she tried to stay upright. Victor appeared almost immediately, his face shifting from calm to concern in a matter of seconds. Seeing her, he asked no questions. Instead, he carefully took her in his arms, and with a firmness that contrasted with the adrenaline he felt, He ordered the car to be prepared. During the drive to the hospital, Victor held Sophia's hand tightly, his eyes focused on the road, but his mind divided between control and concern. "Breathe, Sophia. We're almost there," he said, his voice low but firm, trying to convey calm. "I don't understand. This is too soon," she gasped, her face contorted with pain. Despite her fear, there was something comforting in Victor's presence, in the security he radiated. Upon arriving at the hospital, everything moved quickly. The doctors took charge, but Victor didn't step away. Although the staff asked him to wait outside, he flatly refused. "I'm not leaving her alone," he stated, his sharp tone making it clear he wouldn't accept no for an answer. Hours later, the hospital corridors echoed with the cry of a newborn. Victor, standing beside Sophia, looked at little Leo with a mixture of awe and tenderness. The doctor placed the baby in Sophia's arms, who, despite exhaustion, couldn't stop crying with happiness. "He's perfect," she murmured, gently caressing the baby's tiny cheek. Victor, beside her, felt a lump in his throat. He didn't understand why, but at that moment he felt his life had changed forever. He not only wanted to protect Leo, he wanted to protect Sophia. Both were now his priority, though he still didn't dare to admit it. The tranquility of the first few days was brief. Edward, like a persistent shadow, reappeared when Sophia and the baby were already at the mansion. He arrived without warning, pounding on the main door insistently. Victor was the one who opened it, and seeing Edward, his expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" he asked, blocking the entrance with his body. Edward, with a cynical smile and the smell of alcohol clinging to his clothes, raised his hands as if he had no ill intentions. "I just came to talk. I don't want trouble, not yet," he said, his words tinged with a veiled threat. Victor didn't move, his eyes like knives drilling into Edward. "You have nothing to seek here. Sophia and the baby have nothing to do with you." Edward laughed, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Oh, but that child is mine, and if you want me to disappear from their lives, it'll come at a price." Victor clenched his jaw, his patience hanging by a thread. But he was not a man to act impulsively. Instead of confronting him directly, he resorted to something much more effective: his influence. "You have 5 seconds to leave before I call the police," he said, his voice icy. "The police? You think that scares me?" Edward scoffed, taking another step closer. But then, Victor pulled out his phone and dialed a number, letting Edward hear every tone before someone answered on the other end. "Yes, officer. I need your immediate presence at my property. An intruder is threatening my family," Victor said calmly. Edward backed away, realizing he had underestimated Victor. However, before leaving, he cast a final glance at the window where he knew Sophia would be. "This isn't over, Sophia," he growled, before disappearing into the night. Victor closed the door with a deep sigh. Turning, he found Sophia watching him from the staircase, Gabriel in her arms. She had heard everything, and although her face showed concern, there was also gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for everything," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Victor walked towards her, and, for the first time, let his mask of coldness crumble a little. "You don't have to thank me. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you both." Sophia looked at him intently, and for an instant, the barriers between them seemed to disappear. At that moment, both knew that their lives were intertwined in a way neither had planned, but which now seemed inevitable. A new life is born, and a formidable protector emerges. What do you think this shared experience and mutual protection means for Victor and Sophia's unspoken feelings? Share your hopes for their future in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the beautiful culmination. The mansion was bathed in a comforting silence that night. Leo, now a few months old, was sleeping deeply in his crib, his tiny hands resting on the soft blanket Sophia had chosen with such care. Sophia remained by him, leaning over the crib, whispering a lullaby she remembered from her childhood. The dim light of the nursery illuminated her serene face, revealing a mixture of exhaustion and peace that only a mother could understand. Victor watched her from the half-open door. He had spent the last few months convincing himself that his feelings for Sophia were a mix of gratitude and admiration, but deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. Every moment he shared with her and with Leo brought him closer to an undeniable truth. That night, as he watched her gently caress Leo's tiny head, something inside him decided he could no longer hide it. He took a step into the room, causing the soft creak of the wood to catch Sophia's attention. She turned, surprised to see him there so late. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke, as if the air had become charged with more than just words. "Victor, is everything all right?" she asked in a whisper, so as not to wake Leo. He inhaled slowly, though in his mind the words he wanted to say swirled with an intensity that left him breathless. He took a few more steps towards her, his dark eyes reflecting a vulnerability he rarely showed. Yes or no? "I don't know, Sophia," he admitted, letting out a slight sigh. His hands, always firm and sure, now rested restlessly at his sides. "There's something I need to tell you." Sophia straightened, her eyes cautiously searching his. She had learned to read Victor in these months, and she could see that something profound was unsettling him. "Tell me," she replied softly, setting aside her own nervousness. Victor looked at her intently, taking a moment to gather the necessary courage. He was a man accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, but at that moment, he felt like a child learning to walk for the first time. "You changed my life, Sophia," he began, his voice low but charged with emotion. "When I met you, I thought I was doing the right thing, helping you. But over time, I realized that it wasn't me saving you. It was you saving me." Sophia blinked, her lips parted in a mixture of surprise and emotion. Victor's words resonated deeply in her heart, touching chords she had tried to keep protected. "Victor, He gently raised a hand, stopping her before she could speak. "Let me finish," he pleaded, taking another step closer. He was now close enough to smell the subtle perfume that always seemed to surround her. "For years, I lived behind a facade of success and control, but in reality, I was lost. I didn't know what it meant to feel something real until you arrived. You and Leo gave me something I didn't know I needed. A family." Tears filled Sophia's eyes, though a trembling smile appeared on her lips. Her heart pounded, and although she wanted to respond, she was too moved by Victor's words. "I never thought I'd say this, but I love you, Sophia. I love you more than I can explain, and I can't keep pretending this is just a temporary circumstance. I want to be with you. I want to be part of your life and Leo's, not just as support, but as someone who loves you with all I am." Sophia let out a faint sob, covering her mouth with a hand as tears streamed down her cheeks. She had never expected to hear those words from someone like Victor, a man who at first seemed so distant and cold. "Victor," she murmured, taking a step towards him. "I also thought I was alone, that I could only depend on myself. But you showed me that there's still love, that there's still hope." Before she could say more, Victor leaned towards her, his hands gently holding her as their lips met in a soft kiss, yet filled with emotion. It was a kiss that spoke of promises, of shared futures, and of a love that both knew had come to stay. When they separated, both looked at each other with a mixture of relief and certainty. Leo, as if sensing the moment, let out a small sound from the crib, breaking the silence. Sophia laughed through her tears, turning briefly to look at her son, before turning her gaze back to Victor. "It seems Leo agrees with you," she joked, her voice still trembling with emotion. Victor smiled, and for the first time in a long time, he felt his life had a true purpose. "Then we're on the right path," he replied, gently taking Sophia's hand. That night, in the dimness of Leo's room, a new stage began in their lives, one filled with love, hope, and the promise of a future together. A powerful confession, a love finally acknowledged. What do you think this declaration means for their future? Share your emotional reactions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the beautiful culmination of their story. The soft light of dusk filtered through the large windows of the mansion's main living room, illuminating the intimate ceremony that would mark a new beginning for Victor and Sophia. The space, decorated with white flowers and delicately arranged candles, exuded a warmth that reflected the love that had grown between them. It wasn't an ostentatious event, as many would have expected from someone like Victor. It was simple, sincere, and full of meaning, exactly as Sophia had imagined it. Leo, now almost a year old, sat quietly in Sophia's arms, dressed in a tiny suit that made him look like a little prince. Sophia looked at him occasionally as the officiant's words resonated through the room, filling the air with solemnity. Dressed in an elegant white lace gown, her radiant beauty eclipsed even the most beautiful flowers adorning the place. But beyond her appearance, it was the peace and happiness on her face that caught the attention of all present. Victor, by her side, was impeccable in his black suit, but his expression was what truly stood out. The man who once seemed made of steel now showed a vulnerability that only love could attract. His eyes were fixed on Sophia, as if she were the center of his universe, and in many ways, she was. When it was time for the vows, Victor stepped forward, gently taking Sophia's hands. "Sophia, I never thought I deserved a second chance in life, much less in love," he began, his voice firm but charged with emotion. "But you entered my world and changed everything. You taught me to feel, to trust, and to believe in something bigger than myself. Today I promise you, with all that I am, that I will always be by your side. I will protect you and Leo with every fiber of my being, and I will do everything possible so you never lack anything." Sophia let out a soft sob, her eyes filling with tears that refused to fall. She squeezed Victor's hands tightly before speaking, her voice soft but full of determination. "Victor, when I thought everything was lost, you arrived and showed me there was still hope. You not only gave me a home, but also a love I never thought I'd find. I promise to be with you every step of the way, to support you, to love you, and to build together the future we always dreamed of." Their words resonated in the hearts of those present, eliciting sighs and emotional smiles. Leo, as if understanding the importance of the moment, babbled softly, drawing a general laugh that eased the emotional tension of the moment. Victor leaned down to him, tenderly stroking his little head before returning his attention to Sophia. When the officiant declared them officially husband and wife, Victor didn't hesitate to lean toward Sophia and kiss her with an intensity that spoke of everything they had overcome together. Applause filled the room, and the friends and staff who had witnessed their story approached to congratulate them. The celebration continued in the back garden, where tables decorated with flowers and hanging lights created a magical atmosphere. The mansion's staff, who had gradually become a kind of family to Sophia and Leo, participated in the festivities with enthusiasm. Mrs. Davies, always maternal, took Leo in her arms, while the newlyweds enjoyed a moment of tranquility. "He's such a special child," Mrs. Davies commented, smiling proudly as she caressed the little one's cheek. "He is," Victor replied, looking at his son with a mixture of love and gratitude. "He changed our lives." Later, as the guests departed, and the night enveloped the mansion in its starry cloak. Victor and Sophia sat together in a corner of the garden, enjoying a rare moment of silence. Leo slept deeply in his pram, leaving his parents a moment to themselves. "Can you believe everything we've been through to get here?" Sophia asked, resting her head on Victor's shoulder. "Sometimes it still feels like a dream," he admitted, wrapping an arm around her. "But if it's a dream, I don't want to wake up." Sophia smiled, closing her eyes as she enjoyed the warmth of the moment. For the first time in a long time, she felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. And while the future remained uncertain in many ways, she knew that together they could face anything. Because now, they were no longer alone. They were a family. If you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like and share your thoughts in the comments. I love reading your opinions and knowing which part of the story moved you the most. Thank you for accompanying me, and we'll see you in the next story, full of love, emotion, and hope.